Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Deer Hunting Podcast, episode number 122. Jim Burnworth from Western Extreme, examining the anatomy of the perfect bow shot. Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level.
Hey, this is Steph Brown, the Ohio Huntress. Get ready for another amazing episode with Jay and Dusty on the Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Hunting Podcast.
Hey, everybody, this is Stephen Fuller from the Hunting Ground. You are listening to my favorite podcast on the internet, the Big Buck Registry's the Big Buck Deer Hunting Podcast.
Hi, this is Jean McFall, finalist of Extreme Huntress from Boise, Idaho. You are about to listen to one of my favorite hunting podcasts of all time, the Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Deer Hunting Podcast.
Welcome to the show. This is Jay Scott, your host of the Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Deer Hunting Podcast. You know, I'm psyched you're joining us right here, right now. There's no place I'd rather be. And I've also got my good friend, as usual, from Ohio, Dusty Phillips.
What's happening, everybody? I'm glad to be here, Jay, and I hope everybody's having the best of luck in the whitetail woods this season.
Yes, sir. I'm having some amazing moments with my son in the woods. We're seeing deer. I'm seeing turkeys. I'm shooting at them, not hitting them, but I'm seeing them. And
It's part of it. It's
part of it, man. It's just such a great experience to be outside and be part of that whole thing. And as we are going to be talking with our guest, it is so important to make that whatever it is you're hunting, whether it's deer, elk, mule deer, turkeys, it's important to put a value on them, and a value that they are a resource and that we need to conserve them and take what we can when we have those abilities. But that is important. These animals are important. And without that, you might as well just kiss the entire species goodbye, because nobody's going to care.
Right. It comes from a long history of hunting and what it's come to today.
Exactly. So we're kind of transitioning out of some of the archery hunting. But I did ask a friend of ours, Jim Burnworth, who has a TV show on the Outdoor Channel.
Yeah, Western Extreme.
Western Extreme. He is one of the most technical people I've ever met. And it kind of goes back to his father in being in the digital age, in the TV age of video. He's just super technical in everything he does. So we asked him to join us to kind of break down a few different things. Number one, we wanted to learn more about how he studied the anatomy of the bow shot. You think about all these great tools and how the bow has progressed over time, and all the fancy cams and wheels and limbs and quivers and arrows. And I'm not sure there's anybody else that I've talked to out there, even the bow techs, even the manufacturers themselves. I'm not sure there's anybody out there that's really studied the bow as Jim Burnworth has.
Yeah, Jim's like a Rolodex of critical factual intelligence and super, super intelligent on the bow.
Yeah, he just rolls it all into one. You have to pay attention to this show, and you probably have to play it 2 or 3 times. I have to be honest, because there's some things that you've probably never heard the terms on occasion. But once you understand what he's saying and you apply it to your life as a archer, it will improve your shot. I guarantee it tenfold, because there are things you're doing today that you can improve upon with the help of Jim Burnworth's insight and his studies. So listen very closely and play it 2 or 3 times and take notes. And then there's all these other things in life that he's studied and has experienced. Get into a little bit of the anti-hunter, get into hunting with his children, he's just a great all around guy. And I love listening to him talk. And you know what I like about Jim a lot is how he says, bro. He always calls you bro. Makes you feel like you're part of the family.
Right. Yeah. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So, I can't thank Jim enough, but let's get into this interview with Jim Burnworth. Jim Burnworth, welcome to the Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Deer Hunting Podcast. How are you, my friend?
Doing really, really well. I'm excited. We're talking about big bucks.
Our favorite topic of all time, I have to say.
Exactly. That's what you do after hours. If you're not hunting them during the day, you got to be talking about them at night. So I'm in.
For sure.
That's right. Hunt them during the day, talk about them at night. That's just the way it goes. Yes, sir.
Exactly.
So, Jim, where are you right now?
Well, I'm actually in Montana. I just finished doing a public land hunt with both of my daughters, and now I'm trying to fulfill my own tag with a bow. So we're out here in Montana in a little lonely town out of Ekalaka, and trying to make it happen.
Lonely towns are good for big bucks, I heard.
Yeah, especially in Montana. Not the big sky state, it's a big buck state.
That is true. Very cool. So, Jim, where are you from originally? We talked a little bit last night, and you were kind of filling me in on some of your background, but where are you from?
You know, I grew up in a little town called Tillamook, Oregon, and now that I've been able to travel the world, and in many ways, I just feel like how fortunate I was to be able to grow up with the people that I've got to hunt with, the lessons that I learned. I truly believe, after now being everywhere, that some of the best hunters I've ever met in my life, real woodsmen, live in Oregon. You know, the town is full of loggers, and the timber and the country is extremely steep and wet. And I grew up basically hunting blacktail bucks and Roosevelt bull elk, and those are just priceless things and lessons that I learned that help me today, you know, in many ways.
Oh, no kidding. So Oregon is your place of origin, and that's kind of, do you attribute that to your mental toughness, your physical toughness, and learning or knowing what you know today about the outdoors and the hunting? Do you attribute a lot of that to living in Oregon?
Yeah, definitely. You know, I mean, like I said, it's a logging community. You know, I wasn't a normal kid when I was growing up. My father actually invented video electronics. And so, he had a manufacturing plant there, and, I didn't play sports. I wasn't a basketball kid. I wasn't a soccer kid. I really believe that I was an archery kid. And, you know, I've spent a lot of time mentoring and teaching as well, because I really believe that a lot of those kids that don't identify in a normal atmosphere with a bunch of them can be self-taught and self-study and spend time by themselves, competing against themselves and becoming better, and finding the outdoors is amazing, you know. But that's really what I did. I either worked, you know, right after school, and if I wasn't working, I basically was in the woods, you know, driving the hills and hanging out with a bunch of people that were really, really, really good. Some of the toughest hunting in the whole world is there.
Right.
A blacktail buck is extremely smart. He's nocturnal. You know, I could count on both hands how many truly mature 5, 6, 7-year-old deer that I saw there, you know, growing up, and the millions of miles that we put on the trucks just looking for them, you know.
Very interesting. So your dad, you said, he invented video electronics.
Yeah, my dad's kind of like I lost him a few years back. He's my best friend. You know, you can't have the conversations with anybody else like you can with your father. And my dad was like truly a Forrest Gump. It sounds ridiculous, but he broke 27 world records with cards. His name was on the side of the Blue Flame. He built a Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 deep space probe mirrors that are on the way to Andromeda, and every single planet outside our solar system that we see are reflected from those mirrors. They work through a series of noise that's sampled, and then we actually see those planets. And then he worked on the exact SR-71 that broke all the speed and altitude records. Had a bunch of boys from Lockheed because he was building beryllium pistons for Formula 5000 cars. And so I have 77 photo albums, and I grew up at the racetrack with him when I was really little. And then he really had this really strange man named Earl Madman Muntz, who won and lost more fortunes. Very first guy to bring the $99 black and white television set. Very first guy to bring to Los Angeles a Sony Betamax machine.
Yeah.
And so and my dad being working on a lot of like Disney cars, ended up working on a lot of different projects, and that turned into him starting a video electronic company that became man of the decade in the video industry, invented all types of video electronics, and died with 27 patents in color correction. So I just spent a lot of time, learning video, hanging out with video engineers. I didn't hang out with kids. I hung out with adults, handed them, Pepsis, took out their trash, and they taught me things. And those are lessons that I can't learn any other way,
That's
made me who I am today.
That's intense, Jim. That's really intense. That's some really brainiac kind of stuff when you get down to it.
Yeah, we were the very first people to ever load video into hard drives. Sony was trying to do it for $550,000. We're using what's called run length encoding.
Okay. And
I installed myself in Kennebunkport, Maine, Camp David, OEB, exactly the White House building for the President of the United States. What you're almost talking on right now, like the Skype, the very first 354 lines that were proprietary for the President of the United States. So they would do store and forward. And every single day, the President of the United States watches the news feed on what the world is being told. Back in the day, they used to have it on a tape, and they wanted to be able to ship that. And so we would actually record it, and we would ship it over a phone line, decode it, and they would actually watch it. And it was one of the very first, pieces of technology that started the whole internet boom and the way that we, view and process video today. But those are big lessons that I learned and made me think, cool stuff.
That's really cool stuff.
Super cool.
Wow. So when did you?
I know it sounds ridiculous.
Well, it sounds sci-fi. It's just crazy.
I know. But the people were like, my dad literally went around the world and he found people that it literally invented the video industry. I mean, guys that built the very first chroma key, or guys built the very first cross point latch that switched A to B. Mike Talent, who invented the very first time-based corrector. I've worked with the very first A to D converter was built by the guy at Linco, Bruce Blair, who lived right up the street from Farnworth, who invented television. And so these are the people that were my mentors and people I got to hang out with, people that no one else would have access to. Their hair stood up. They were smart. They never had a tan in their entire lives, didn't relate to anybody. Very strange, but yet extremely bright. So, yeah.
That is fascinating. So when did your dad hunt too, or is that just something that came on your own ground?
It's funny because my dad, my elk are my passion in my life,
Yeah.
and my dad was really funny. He would have like big coats on that he had stuff custom sewn on and big Bowie knives. And he's like, the pictures are hilarious, right? And big Weatherby. And, still my dad died and never killed an elk. In fact, the rumor has it when I was 12 years old, my dad bought me my very first bow when I was 12. And, that year we practiced all year long, and I practiced and they really didn't practice. Well, him and my uncle got up and they went up on top of this hill and they found 3 little spikes, and they went up there and they missed them all. And I begged him. I'm like, Dad, man, if I would have had a chance, I would have hit one of them. Please, bro, let me skip school tomorrow. I really want to go up there and chase an elk. Come on, man. I want my opportunity. He was like, no. And then a couple hours later, he right before I went to bed, he's like, okay, you're going to skip school. You can go at this tomorrow. So the funny part about it is the 3 of us went over the top of the hill, went down over the top, and I looked down, and sure enough, this little spike they had shot at the day before stood up. And I basically pulled the bow back, closed my eyes, pulled the trigger, hoped for the best, shot him right through the liver. The bull went like 30 yards and fell over dead. And then I was legendary because I was basically 13 years old, shot my very first bull elk. And, I found this is something I can do. This is something I'm good at. And back then, we didn't know which side of the string to look on. I mean, there was nobody that you could learn anything from. I only knew 3 bow hunters in our entire town. The hills were ourselves, it's right. And that was the start of something that just became a passion. That first arrow, as Nugent says, the mystical flight of the arrow is contagious. And once you shoot the first one, it just doesn't stop. It keeps rolling. It's part of your life. It's in your DNA. It's who you are.
Right. That's true. That's so true. Yeah. Once you take your first shot, and it's stuck with you forever. That is amazing.
For sure.
So you've like your dad studied the digital age. You studied the bow shot, and you've gotten into some pretty technical stuff regarding that. You want to tell us a little bit about your studies?
I don't know why. I've always had a technical brain, and so I didn't want to make any more mistakes. I mean, no one on earth has made as many mistakes as I have, and that's from controlling your adrenaline to controlling your breathing to thinking correctly to building a system and a regiment that you follow. I think a lot of weekend warriors just, if they can hit a pie plate at 40 yards, they're in. But I wanted to be able to shoot effectively. I wanted to know my real effective range. I wanted to be able to understand the bow. And by the time I was 15, I had full access to our machine shop. So, I was taking a lot of the early PSE bows. Pete Shepley was one of my absolute heroes. He's probably the only guy that's actually owned a bow company that physically is hunted on the ground, and they were at one time the largest bow company in the world. But I used to try to turn them up with Strataflights. I built a bow myself that was over 400 feet a second that shot a 22.5-inch arrow using stops that we use like string stops now.
Yeah.
But I looked at the draw force curve. The very first time I looked in Bowhunter and saw a draw force curve and understood it for the first time, I built this bow that went over 400 feet a second. People are still trying to do it today. It sounded like it was dry firing. It had, teardrops on it, but I was building like overdraws on the opposite side of the rest, and they come back and they clear the cables, and I was experimenting with all these forward handle things that I machined. I just was doing all kinds of wacky stuff. And surprisingly, I lived through that, and I didn't hurt myself.
Right,
but
right.
I love the archery stuff. So, in the recent years, one of the things I'm amazed at is how the archery industry has just wrapped their arms around me. People have found out, and they've watched the show, and they've seen how I've been able to shoot, and then all of the commercial related stuff in the background from a marketing perspective with our companies. And so, I've done every kind of a high speed test. I think there's only like 3 archers in the world that have done the study that we have to understand how they physically work. And from that, a lot of products, a lot of improvements. And the big thing for me is that I'm for everybody. I want to help everybody. Archery is not about competition. It's not about, with competitiveness, there's growth. And with the more research we do and the more that we know, it's safer, it's more ethical. People are actually making the shots better. The arrow flight is changed. And so, I've been working on a bunch of projects this year, but the stuff that I've learned through high speed photography is unbelievable. And just comparing product to product, never trying to slander anybody, but even secretly calling them and going, dude, I did this test and the results, and this is what I found. So, and I love archery. It's who I am.
Gotcha. Can we talk about some of those studies a little bit?
Well, let me just talk about this. Like, I know that one of the things that I worked on, although the weight's physically on the string, when you start to draw the bow, it takes the weight. And my personal bow that I just built a Frankenstein on this year has almost 400 pounds of cable tension on it. And when you start to draw the bow, it moves that weight to the control in the bus cable. With a stiff rod and the way that the risers are actually designed, it actually bends the riser. So I used to take a camera at 2,700 frames a second and count at the settling time and watch the riser actually distort. That's one of the reasons why a lot of riser manufacturers or bow manufacturers have actually changed the risers and went to like I-beam type designs to stiffen up the riser and try to knock the weight out of it. But also you have to realize when that weight is off the side of like, remember the carbon fiber rods back in the day?
Yep.
They used to have the sliders on them. Well, when I first started understanding what that meant is that the arrow goes through 2 apexes before it leaves the bow. So you have one, wherever there's an action, there's a reaction. So you have it both horizontally and vertically. It apexes in both directions. The spine has to be perfect in order for it to change. And that is dynamic spine. There are 2 types of spines in arrows in the way that they actually react. But that carbon fiber rod, I used to sand them until they would physically bend. And then years later on the Bowtech bows now, we have a flex guard. Well, you can take and draw that through a hooter shooter, watch it on the wall and watch the laser pointer, and you can see where over half the lateral movement is taken out of the arrow. Whenever we can get it into full gyro and correct it quicker, and then a lot of people talk about what's called parallel knock travel. Well, the center of the bow is not the center of your hand. The booger buttons try to go lower and lower and lower as we started to work on, lead off, cam timing. There's a lot of issues that happen with an overall bow so that you can have performance as well as shootability, and then you have to have the speed. So all these things play a factor in the overall development of it. But if you look at the way a lot of them are manufactured now and parallel knock travel, like the bow I'm shooting right now is within a quarter of a knock. I basically take a line that is completely horizontal on the wall, and then in slow motion, I actually track that knock travel. And this has to do with the spine of the arrow. And we made some major improvements in arrows this year. This is like one of the largest things I almost spent a big portion of my year on arrows in general, like not only in studying, but working with a top manufacturer as well as some engineering level people in order to look at what the next arrow looks like.
It's interesting you just said that, because as you're describing the improvements to the bow in your studies, I'm thinking, well, all this has to lead back to a more improved arrow, pretty much.
Yeah, it does. Like it's about shooting it out of it. But one of the things that really surprised me, a lot of people, I can't tell you, I try to listen to everybody and I take critiques on what I do right and what I do wrong. And I feel like I am myself and I cannot be bought for money. I've stayed true to myself. I don't solicit products that I don't believe in. Half the things that are on my body or in my pack, I buy. Would people give them to me? Absolutely. But then I'm accountable to each one of them. And so I'm not like a big product guy. I really believe in it or I don't shoot it. And, through the learning process. And so one of the things that I had looked at, everybody comes to me and says, oh my gosh, I learned so much from your show. You are such a technical archer. And I feel like I don't even do any teaching, because the balance between the entertainment of the hunting and the teaching are two different segments of the market, and whether people do or don't want to view it, and my show's been rated number one on and off out of 400 programs over the course of time. Been very blessed that way. And you can't buy audiences. They either like it or they don't. But the big thing that I did this thing for Dickies, and the network came to me and said, Jim, can you come up with 3 really high-end tips, things that people have never heard about before, and teach them something that you do? And I said, well, I just want to talk about arrows. I want to talk about spine of arrows, because a lot of people are buying very expensive arrows on straightness. Now, straightness is important, but I can't outshoot straightness. Now, a guy like Tim Gillingham or, Levi Morgan, people that shoot an arrow for a living, at that competitive level, guys that can actually field archer like that, they talk a lot about the straightness of the arrow. But in my testing, I believe that a lot of people are spending a lot of extra money for straightness when they should actually be looking at spine alignment. So there's a weak spine and there is a stiff spine on every single arrow. So I used to take a water bucket, like you can take your metal bow box and you fill it with water. Then you take the knock and you cut it off so that you just have 2 blunt ends, so it can't have any tails. You stick it in the water and the arrow will automatically rotate to the spine. Then you take a marker and you mark that point, and then you dynamically can check the spine on every single arrow. So that weak part, as it's coming out of the bow, is not rotated and oriented in different directions. Now, I'm not bragging, but in my life, I only took one picture of one group I've ever shot. And without a shadow of a lie, call it the lottery draw, call it you won poker and did a straight. But I shot 4 arrows at 100 yards and all 4 fletches were touching. Now that was with pins and without a magnifier. And on average, I try to shoot what I call a quarter minute and without an arrow tune. So let's say that we had 2 archers, they were competing side by side and they both could shoot equally, and one tuned their arrows with the spine alignment and the other one didn't. Then in fact, the guy that spine aligned them would win. It's very important though that you cut the arrows and put the insert in there before you actually spine align, because it'll rotate almost 18 degrees. So I'm basically telling you, this is a trick that you can do with any arrow that is carbon made, what's called a pre-preg rolled process, so they don't have any retention in memory. And then I worked with a very, very intelligent man who I really believe has changed an entire company, with Victory Archery, Steve Greenwood. When he came in, he was a grown up, bro. He worked really hard and he built the very first spine aligned shaft based upon, my early findings and the amount. I had over 3,000 emails off that one show.
Wow.
People wanting to know more about spine alignment. And that told us that the audience was waiting for something, that technology, and to look at it. So every single arrow that comes from a Victory shaft now has spine alignment. The very first one, I'm very proud of that. And now there's some more arrow technologies that I can't talk about that I'm under non-disclosure with right now, that we're working on to improve it. But sorry to be long-winded, but this stuff's important. We got to talk about it.
That's very important. It's very technical. So how do you describe that to like the layman, the person that doesn't engage in this stuff? Can you kind of summarize it for somebody?
Yeah. So here's a really quick step on how you can improve your shooting and increase your effective range and tuning the arrow. So it's really important that the bow is actually tuned and that you pick the right arrow and it's the right length and it's spine weighted for that particular draw weight. And there are some stuff from like Fire Knock as a reference. George at Fire Knock is one of the smartest engineers. He has 5 PhDs, one of the smartest guys I've ever hung out with. He invented a special machine to be able to do this very simply. But what you basically do is you get your bow box, your metal bow box, fill it full of water so that it's like 3 or 4 inches. You plug both ends of the arrow. You cut it to length and you plug both ends of the arrow so that water cannot trap on both sides. Now, you can't just plug it with a knock on either side because that has tails on it and will affect its rotation. So it's important that those are skinny plugs. You put it in the water and it will float. When it floats, it'll mark the spine directly up. Then take a marker and go ahead and mark that point. And then when you fletch your fletches, you're going to orient that fletch, your cock vein on that line on every one of your 12 dozen. It'll only take a few minutes. And then your arrows are actually spine aligned. Now I can grab them and rotate them and bend them and feel it, but you'd have to have some sensitivity and you have to have some experience to be able to do that. But this is just part of my journey on how to make the perfect arrow. Okay.
All right. Very interesting. That's fascinating. So what else have you studied besides the spine alignment and the stiffness of the bows? What else has come across your path that you think is interesting?
A few years back, I got ornery and I talked about deflex and reflex risers, and I see a lot of even professional shooters out there that don't really understand the dynamics. And we have what we call fork tuning and what we call a deflex and reflex riser. In fact, when the Bowtech bow came out, the Invasion was a revolutionary bow. It had the 5 attributes on it. It had the tam timing that is actually like a sprocket in a chain in a bicycle. It has a very special like camshaft style or a crankshaft style axle in the bow that costs a lot of money, but it keeps for cam timing and let off. Pretty brilliant how the whole thing works. So it'll shoot the straightest arrow out of any bow made. But deflex and reflex risers has everything to do with hand torque. Hand torque is the one thing that I try to rid myself from. And it's hard to explain here on the podcast, but I'm going to go ahead and see what I can do about it.
Okay.
What I try to do is I try to load the bow. I have one point in my hand. That point actually goes into my joints and goes all the way up into my arm. In fact, a few years back, I did a special thing with my daughter on one of the shows, and it's on my Facebook page that people can reference. But I show you how to properly hold that bow so that you have reference. You can't take the bow handle, and if you pointed right now and you took your other hand and you put it on your knuckle of your thumb, and you tried to put that bow close to your body and then grab the bowstring, and as you start to lift that bow away from your body, you're going to watch your knuckle twist. And so you can't draw it like that. You have to actually have your hand in place, extended, your arm fully extended with pressure from the string before you start to draw that bow so that you're in line. And the deflex and the reflex riser has everything to do with the speed of the bow. And we're not talking about settling times. We're not talking about what I call lock time, which is like if 2 bows went at 360 feet a second. And even though they both went 360, it's the amount of time that it takes for that arrow to physically leave the bow. This has everything to do with like drop time cycles, like how long the rest should be up, how much guidance we have, whether it's going through the second apex that actually has collision. There's just so much to this stuff. It looks so simple, and everybody who's shooting 40 yards, whatever. But, I made catastrophic long shots. Like, I hate to say them, and everybody bashes me for it, but every single arrow I shoot, I'm responsible for. Every one of them I practiced. There are a lot of conditions. I have what I call my go, no-go gauge. I draw the bow. I look for my rhythm. So here's a real tip. Here's one of the most amazing tips in archery. And if anybody's listening to this, should actually record it, listen to it, reference it, send it to their friends. It should become completely viral, because I'm going to tell you for the first time the difference between becoming a really good shot and a mediocre shot.
Okay.
So this is the way 99.9% of all people shoot a bow. They draw the bow, and you want to be able to relax your front arm. You do all the steering with the back. And you have to dynamically and statically balance the bow. And you have to have enough pressure, and the draw length has to be right to where I can pull my front arm against my back arm to create tension to where the pin physically sets.
Right.
So a few years back, as a reference, I was shooting a baseball off the end of a bat at 100 yards in front of 50,000 people at a baseball stadium.
I saw that.
Now, I would have been booed off that, right? So I would have been booed. I mean, think about that. The pressure, it's one thing to do it in my backyard, but it's another thing to do it in the wind in front of the 50,000 crowd, completely nervous. And if I could not have held the pin in the ball, the odds of me hitting that are none. The bow, the arrow, my aiming, the tune of the bow, everything had to be perfect to hit that baseball off the end of a bat. The only way I can do that is to hold that pin in that ball. So what I do is I actually teach people with a laser. So you go down to 7-Eleven and you buy a $20 laser. You take some tape and you tape it onto your riser. Now, I don't want that laser in your sight picture. I want the pin that you aim with every day, and I want you to start at 20 yards. And at Home Depot, you can buy these 1-inch round little tabs that have a nail in the center of them. And you go ahead and you put those in the target, okay?
Okay.
And at 20 yards, your wife, your kids, your spouse, your dad, whatever, takes a little video camera on his phone, and I want him to videotape the sporadicness of that laser hitting above the target, not in your sight picture.
Okay.
Okay. And all I want you to do is I want you to draw the bow, pull your front arm against your back arm, start to create tension, and see if you can actually hold that pin in that 1-inch round dot. And if you can, and you do your very best, then you would now have the very first day what that laser looked like. And in an average archer's mind, this is the way it looks like. They're like, okay, here it comes. The pin's coming up into the orange dot. It's almost there. And then your mind goes from like aiming to triggering. And then as it starts to float through the spot, you start to get on the trigger. And then when you float through it, you're hoping that your balance and body and what your eye was looking at was aligned when it went off to be able to hit the orange dot. But what if you could actually use that tension between your front and back arm? What if you could actually, you might have a little too much stabilizer weight. You might have had your sight a little too far out because your rest and your sight should be the same distance, fork tuned, in order to have very little hand torque. And then you made your draw length perfect to where you're pulling your front arm against your back arm. And so for 1 week, what you do is you sit at that target starting at 10 yards and you do not fire an arrow, not one. You have to discipline yourself to not fire an arrow. You draw the bow, you hold the pin in that orange dot as best you can. You stop your breathing and then you draw back down when you burn your oxygen, relax, rest, draw back. And 1 week later, you will not believe you go ahead and videotape that laser again and you won't believe how your rhythm has slowed down. It teaches you to micro aim. That's one of the biggest tips I have, and I'm sorry to be long-winded, but that's a good one.
I think you had to be long-winded on that one. I think that's important. That might be the best tip we've ever had.
Agreed.
On this podcast. That's incredible. And you have to be detailed about that one because there's a lot of little points along the way that help you become a better shooter. And if you don't tell it exactly as you did, Jim, we don't get from point A to point B. That's really amazing.
And there's one more simple one that I'll just run through really quickly that'll help an average shooter too. What I want everybody to do is I want everybody to grab their release and put it in their hand. I want them to look at the majority of them shoot a claw. Okay. Mm-hmm. A really good reference. I don't shoot for this company, but I think one of the best little releases is called the Little Goose from Scott. It's one of the ones that I start a lot of people on. One of the things I do when they're first starting is I put their thumb behind their neck. But I want you to take the release, whatever caliper release you have, I want you to put it in your hand, and I want you to just watch the claw, and I want you to start to apply pressure on the trigger and watch how much travel you have to add before those claws start to open, okay? And a professional release, like a back hinge release or anything, maybe like harder, anything that like we shoot professional with, it has a snap trigger on it. We have tension sets, and I want to talk about loading the trigger. This is so important.
Okay.
So everybody, 99% of the people I teach and I look at, their draw lengths are too long, number one. Number two, you have to pick a release before you pick a draw length. This is so important because you can vary over an inch on your draw length depending on how long the release is. So I want you to shorten the release up. And a lot of times it's so short that they have a hard time putting it on the string because they feel like that trigger's too far behind in their palm of their hand.
Mm-hmm.
But now I want you to know how much pressure it takes. So when you draw the bow, you're going to draw it, you're going to put your finger on it, then you're going to start to relax and you're going to start to aim. I want you to load your finger clear into the far joint of your knuckle with that trigger, and I want you to start to apply pressure, knowing how much it takes for it to go off. The time from when you say, I'm going to trigger, and that your finger actually moves is way too much time to add up. But if you start to preload that trigger and you get it the exact right length, you won't believe the difference in your group sizes. This is another one of the major tips that's really simple that you got to go through to tune that and understand it, and you'll increase your effective range.
Okay. Those are some amazing tips. That's just, I'm going to go out and start them tomorrow because I know I'm not, I know I'm not that great a shot. But this stuff is priceless. So Jim, thank you for sharing that information.
No problem at all, bud. No problem at all.
Let's transition a little bit into the hunt itself. We kind of get in the technical aspects of the bow shot and the anatomy of a bow shot, and that's just blew my mind. Let's talk about transitioning some of that into the hunt itself, and specifically about what you do, Jim. Let's talk about some mule deer hunting if we could. And I'm kind of curious as to what do you bring into the woods with you? And I like to have kind of Dusty, you kind of run us through your gear check. What do you do there?
I'm very simple. Like, I really am. Like, I hunted in tennis shoes most of my life. I just used my wheels and my legs to get wherever I needed to go. I'm not real fancy on my gear. I find disappointment in most of the products that are built. People try hard, but I think they only go to about 90%. They don't really go to 100%. They don't really think things through enough. And I think a lot of that is just that people who are actually manufacturing the products don't actually use a lot of it themselves, and they're looking for feedback, but then most people are all just sponsor hungry. So they're willing to say how great of a product it is and not really give real feedback,
Right.
Just honestly. But I think the big thing is that I want things attached to my body. I spot and stalk on the ground, right? I have to, in daylight hours with a cameraman over my shoulder, I have to get it done. And I haven't shot one animal in 12 years that is not on camera. I've shot over 1,000 big game animals with my bow. On average, I shoot between 50 and 70 big game animals a year, including Africa. And so I just do it over and over and over again. And so I want things strapped tight. I want to be able to be mobile. Knee pads are a big thing. Sometimes I put them underneath my jeans. Gigantic. My binoculars, I'm not talking about product, but there is not another pair of binoculars other than a Swarovski. That's it. That's the bomb. I believe that everybody should own a pair.
Okay.
Like, it's hard to come up with that cash, but it's the ultimate. You can't live without them. Believe it or not, the best rangefinder made is made by Leica. And I told my wife a long time ago, I said, I don't care how much money I make. I've arrived when I have a Bowtech in my hand. I have a Night Force on top of my firearm. I have a Leica rangefinder and a pair of Swarovski binoculars. So I guess I've arrived.
So you have that stuff now, I take it.
Yes. And it's like, everybody's like, why is he using one over another? Because I can't be bought for money, because that is the best product made. Like it, take it, leave it, whatever. It's who I am.
Right.
Makes sense, though.
It does. Very much.
If you find something that works and you believe in, why not use it?
It's my moneymaker,
Absolutely.
I want to be a buck richer.
Makes sense, though. Get in a little more detail on what kind of bow setup are you using when you're hunting?
Man, I don't know if I can tell you, because everybody, Bowtech's not real happy with me if I start telling you about the Frankenstein stuff. One of the things I've been working on this last year is strings. Strings are just a gigantic thing. I look at limb deflection. Who's to say that the top and the bottom limb doesn't actually have 2 to 4 pounds of limb deflection and the balancing of that? So I have a bunch of very big tuning things. But right now, I basically took a Boss, which is the best riser I've ever shot, with an Insanity XL limb, and a cam. And then I worked out my own geometry and built a string set, and I'm shooting, my eyesight's not as good as it's ever been, but I'm shooting better than I ever have in my entire life. And that has to do with holding, and the bow that I built. So I built 2 of them, and I'm really proud of them. And I'm also using that quivalizer. And Dan Evans had the first stab at probably the most innovative sight ever built. He has a multi-pin that actually has a movable that slides out of the way, and then it has a single pin all built into one sight. Totally innovative, off the chart, cool. And when I'm mule deer hunting, that really helps, because as you're starting to stalk a mule deer buck, and I have some rules everybody says, like, you have way too many rules. I've had many outfitters tell me, you have way too many rules. But I look at animal behavior. Animal behavior is the one thing that separates an animal will do things over and over and over again in the same repeated order. And if you use them to your advantage, it can really help you. So let's just go back out. If we close our eyes and we imagine the ultimate mule deer hunt, it would have to be in Alberta, Canada, in late August, as the bucks still are in velvet and they're laying in the canola fields. Some of the biggest deer in the entire world live in Alberta, Canada. And for the last, literally 8 years, I've taken a buck over 170 inches with my bow.
Wow.
And I've learned a lot over the years. I've made a lot of mistakes, and I've stalked some just giant bucks. And I don't approach under 40 yards. Now, a mule deer, when he lays down, he actually takes his legs and he blocks his vitals when he's laying in his bed. And when a mule deer buck stands up, he tips his head down, and then his ass comes up, and then his front shoulders come up. And he gives you the perfect amount of opportunity to be able to draw the bow. So if you're under 40 yards, most likely that mule deer buck will freak out when he stands to look at you, and he'll run to 80 or 90, turn around for about 5 seconds, look at you, and then bound off.
Okay.
A whitetail always jumps from his bed and runs. But if you approach at 40 is a magical number. I have found at 40 yards, if the buck tips his head, stands up, he will, even if he sees you, he will totally stand there and give you the perfect amount of time to be able to shoot him right through the vitals. And that's one of the major tips that I've given a lot of people that have hunted and stalked mule deer, and now I've taken, well over 60 mule deer bucks with my bow. And I just, I've done it over and over and over again, and using the animal behavior just like that, knowing how he's going to react when he stands up, knowing what he's going to do when he stands up, knowing the fact that he'll stand and look before he runs is an important factor. These are all animal behavior things that are simple, that you understand them, you do them enough, and you repeat it, and you have it logically in your brain, you follow the procedure, and you get it done.
Gotcha.
Interesting.
Gotcha.
Wow.
So Jim, let's transition a little bit from the mule deer to the whitetail. What animal behavior patterns have you noticed in the whitetail that you can use to your advantage?
Well, the one thing, more hunts have been blown by wind than any other factor on planet Earth. Wind is the number one factor. So here is the largest whitetail. Everybody's hunted them. It's the number one animal in North America, 27 subspecies. Millions of people buy a tag every single year. Here's the number one tip to shoot out of a tree stand ever. I believe in nosebleed stands. So if and I've hunted with a lot of guys that have shot a lot of big deer, and they say that I'm ridiculous, but it doesn't matter. It's who I am. I'm not going to waste my time, and I want to shoot whatever comes in. So here's the number one tip. You take your hat off and you walk every pinch, every bottle. And if you peripherally can see your stand with your hat off on the ground, that stand is too low or positioned in the wrong spot. Always use some really good cover back. No backlight. You want some green background, what I call the 60% contrast ratio in the back. And then here's your number one tip. You can take a stump burner and you can build a paste out of it. And again, I have this recipe on my Facebook page. And you build this paste, and you have to take a pan, and the pan has to have tall sides because it's extremely hot when you do this.
Okay.
Then what you do is you go up on an average day with that average wind current that is in your spot. And after you found that right height where you peripherally can't see yourself, you build a smoke bomb, and then you set in your tree stand and you check that smoke bomb, and you'll watch those thermals and what they do. And what it does is it sees whether or not that wind current will ever touch one of the trails that those bucks come in and out of. Picking the tree is the recipe. Shooting the deer is easy. Getting them to come to that spot's easy, but getting them to not wind you and finding the right tree to become a predator is the most difficult part in the whitetail woods, in my opinion. And so that is a major, major thing, looking at those wind currents. An animal might tolerate seeing you. He might tolerate hearing you. He will not tolerate smelling you.
That's fascinating. So
where have you been all this time, Jim?
Yeah, this is amazing. So it sounds like you're just a student of all things outdoors, whitetails, mule deer, anything that has to do with hunting. Sounds like you're just a student of everything in life, for that matter. Do you consider yourself that?
I like thinking about stuff. You know, my favorite thing to do on planet Earth. I mean, I'm going to be running around in a freaking wheelchair when I'm 90 trying to kill elk. Like, that's just my thing. Calling elk is my number one thing. I tell everybody that I'm not patient. I look like a giraffe. I sound like an elephant. You know, I'm 6'6". I've had to learn to shoot because I can't stalk with the crap. But the one thing that I can do in life is kill elk. Like, that's my thing. Like, and that's where I get supercharged. Everybody says, do you have any more adrenaline? And I say, no, I don't have adrenaline very often. Only when I'm hunting elephants in Africa, or I'm hunting something dangerous, or one of my kids is doing. But the thing that I get off on, the one thing that I feel like God put in my heart that makes the hunt really successful for me is me shooting the magical triangle, me shooting them in the 12 ring, not the 10, the 12. It's hard to stalk around, be in uneven ground, be in an awkward position, knowing your equipment so well, aiming to the point that nothing will take over your brain other than executing and looking at that shot. So this is how I get off. My right eye, I aim, and I always bubble level with my left. And I'm aiming with my right eye. And when I pull my front arm against my back arm, let the pin physically start to settle, come up on the target, never down on the target, hold that spot until the bow physically goes off. And when I'm aiming with my right eye and I watch the arrow, because I shoot with both eyes open, strike the mark that I just shot with my left eye, and it goes in the spot, that right there is Jim's heaven.
Gotcha. All right.
I love that, because I didn't just stalk the animal. I didn't just get close enough. I shot him in the 12 ring. And when I do that, he's going to live 25 seconds. And that for me is the most ethical way that I can bow hunt. Now, I'm not perfect. I've made every mistake there is, but I've strived for that. I've worked for that. I've earned every one of them that I've been able to shoot in the spot. Gotcha.
Tell me more about the 12 ring. What is that? What is that to you?
Oh, it's just a term. Like when you're shooting 3Ds. I used to shoot 3Ds when I was younger. You know, my whole family, we traveled around on Sundays, and I used to compete and stuff. And so for me, it's what they call the X ring. Western Extreme with the X means something to me. So I always talk about shooting the X ring or the 12 ring. That there's there's a 5, an 8, a 10, and then the 12 would be a double X, like in the spot.
Okay.
So sweet.
Gotcha. All right. One of the things, Jim, that I've noticed is that you've expressed yourself on some of your social media pages when you encounter somebody that's an anti-hunter, and you raise some amazingly great points. And I was wondering if you could kind of share some of your beliefs about those that aren't into hunting, that take that extra step to actually go out of their way to make your day a bad day just because you're a hunter and they're not and don't believe in it.
Yeah. I'll never make an excuse. One of the things I've done is I've talked to a lot of young boys who are out chasing young girls and, in school. And I've heard a lot of young men that will not stand up for their hunting heritage or their family because they don't want to be persecuted by some of the young girls that they're in school with. And it's who we are. Like, I mean, it's, they don't understand the whole recipe, but you're right. I've been attacked, here or there, nothing really aggressive. Some of my own neighbors, some of the things that they've said to me and what I stand for, but I am not ashamed of anything. And I believe that I've done a lot of my own research into the things that I truly believe in. And I think it's important that we don't fight. That, one of the things that everybody talks about is a trophy hunter. Oh my gosh, how many times have I heard that trophy hunting is negative? I've heard trophy hunting is negative from a lot of people in the media, a lot of people that are in our sport, that trophy hunting has a bad negative connotation. And this is what I want to say to everybody. When a hunter puts value on an animal, In every single case, there are more of them. If you look at South Africa has hundreds of thousands of animals that are running around on private ranches and put into indigenous places and raised, and all because of $100. So let me give you an example. A few years ago, I was in Chihuahua, Mexico, and I was working with the Ngati Deer Association. Recently, I became the national spokesperson for the Mule Deer Foundation, and I've been speaking more and more on conservation and what that means. And so I was there to observe. So Grandpa said, hey, threw all the cousins in the back of the truck, all the grandsons, everybody. There's about 6 or 8 of us now. They take 22 rifles, way too small, 22 long rifles, way too small to take a deer, but that's what they hunt with. There's no way to judge them or to tell them right or wrong. That's all they have access to. And it's Grandpa's ranch, right? None of the kids have been through hunting safety course. None of them have been truly educated. And the only value of that mule deer is meat. So everybody jumps in the back of the truck. We roll around. And that night, I was so surprised because every fawn, every doe, every buck, anything that we saw, if there was a deer sighting, everybody in the back of that truck started to unload. Why? Because that animal only had meat value. A mule deer buck is worth more than meat. So every non-hunter, every woman that doesn't understand why we love to dress up in makeup and camouflage and smell bad,
right,
always asks, what are you doing with the meat? What did you do with the meat? And what I always say is the meat's important. The meat feeds our families. It's on our table. It's what we pride ourselves in. But the buck is worth more than that. If I had told Grandpa that I was willing to pay $3,000 for every single animal, every single big mature buck on his ranch, he would tell them boys, get out of the truck, go build some water holes, go post the fences. Let's figure out how to get them mule deer off that neighbor's ranch and on ours.
Right.
Because the value of them. And everybody could say, well, that's private. That's worth $3,000. But that's what our tags and our licenses do. Every single billions of dollars that are being generated over a long period of time for all of the fish and wildlife and parks and recs, we fund it. We are the conservationists. We are the guys who love. We are the guys who pay to play. No one loves an elk more than I do. I want to spend time with them. I don't want to look at them on the side of the road every once in a while when I'm driving down there with my Subaru. I want to get out of the truck. I want to go spend time with them. I want to go call them. And so trophy hunting is the greatest thing ever. Every time somebody says they don't believe in trophy hunting, I'm like, okay, so you want me to shoot the does and the fawns?
Right.
Is that way to do the game management? Oh, no. Well, you want me to shoot the mature bucks, right? Then you are for trophy hunting. You do believe in trophy hunting. But I think we don't fight. I think we're very logical. We don't get mad. We try to explain. We try to encourage. And we try to I've often said, it's funny because Charlton Heston was an absolute army for our Second Amendment rights.
Yeah.
And his last address before he died to the NRA, he said, if we focus on anti-gun legislation, but we ignore anti-gun generation, we spend all of our time legislating and none of our time mentoring, in one generation we will have failed. The last time I heard something negative about our sport, it did not come from a vegan or a vegetarian. It came from one sportsman complaining to another sportsman on how he or she spent their time afield. And I just think it's really important that we unify. I don't care if you're doing it behind a fence. Yes, I said that out loud on your podcast. I don't care if you're you have a crossbow or you're a traditional archer or there's some new technology coming down with some air guns, or you're using a 338 Lapua or a 50 BMG. You have a deer tag. The outdoors means something different to you than it means to me. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to love you as a brother. So if you're doing it with a slingshot or a spitwad, if it's ethical and it's legal, I, Jim Burnworth, stand with you, period.
Gotcha. I love that, Jim. Absolutely love that. All right. So what I'd like to do here, Jim, is you've been on a bunch of deer hunts in your lifetime. You've killed a lot of deer, whitetails, mule deer. Is there one hunt in particular? If I ask you the question, what's your most memorable deer hunt? Is there one hunt that pops into your head? Yeah, there is. There's one. Okay. And even though I've shot a lot of big deer, I was actually out in Eastern Oregon, and it was the very first year I could drive. And I was with my really good friend Edgar Sanchez, and we had run around, and I had got above these bucks, and I knocked on a door, and
brought some Tillamook cheese and asked a farmer and if I could hang out. And he said, nah, I don't care if you go chase them. We ran around there and got on top of them. And I hate to say this, but it was a long time ago, and I was 16 years old.
Okay.
And I had this buck standing on the side of the hill, and he was slightly downhill. And it was before we had good range finders. We had those 80-20s that used the mirror reflector in a distance to look at the range. And it was longer than the 80-20. And I made a 92-yard shot and shot a deer through the X-ring, and he went down the hill like he'd been shot with a with a 300 Weatherby Magnum.
Wow.
And my heart was I was shaking so bad that I had to sit down and catch my breath again because of just being able to precisely aim and shoot that. And that's back in the day, dude. That's back when the bows don't look or act or shoot like they do today.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more and just kind of tell us kind of how that all got set up, kind of like a play-by-play?
I'll be honest with you. I don't have a lot of recollection of anything other than the shot. It was a long time ago, but I think I got my roots for that. It's like one of the other elk hunts I remember, back in the day. I was like a lot of people see me as an archer, but I'm equally ballistic tabled on long range rifles.
Okay.
And my father-in-law was a huge influence in my life. And we grew up in Tillamook, of course, and these hills would be so far across these drainages that there was no way that you could walk around for 2 hours, walk into one green tree where you just saw the bull. He was only out for 13 seconds and he walked back in again. So we would have a shooter and somebody who's watching through the spotting scope, and we would watch where we were hitting. And, we shot across these canyons. And so in my early 20s, I bought a Mark IV and I took the crosshairs out of it. And I started taking glue and thread, and I was building my own reticle post up and down the scope. Yeah. And then I took 2 8-foot pieces of plywood and I backed them up, and I took my rangefinder, and then they weren't exactly like 500, 600, 700, but they were referenced at those yardages where it fell in. And then I could shoot across those canyons, and it changed my life forever, being able to shoot long range like that. And I look at it now, that's something I should have patented. I mean, oh my gosh, that was a long time ago. And now BDC reticles and everything is based upon very similar technologies. And back then there were mill dots that, 6-foot man that they used for mills. Right. But other than that technology that they were using with 308s, there really isn't anything to reference. And now, our whole shooter thing blew up now, and so with what Night Force and everybody has, is pretty amazing.
Yep.
I have a bunch of long range rifles, and I did a lot of teaching with high speed photography, watching the bullets and the projectiles. I almost killed Ray Bunny that time when I blew up the car, like just crazy stuff, like just doing stuff that we shouldn't be doing, getting wild.
Of course.
Like teenagers.
How old are you now, Jim?
I'm going to age myself. I'm 47 years old.
47. All right. You're not that much older than I am, so I can relate to a lot of this stuff. That's good. Excellent.
Well, you guys are old.
Yeah. Dusty's a little younger than both of us.
I know.
Jim,
we can still outwalk the 20-year-olds, though, man. You got heart. It's all mental. It's all mental toughness.
That's it. That's
10
exactly
breaths,
right.
10 steps, take a man anywhere.
That's exactly the right attitude.
Hey, Jim, something I recognize that you're super proud of, and that you seem through a video post that you thoroughly enjoy, and that's hunting with your daughters. Can you tell us a little bit about how old your daughters were when they got started and how they're doing today?
Yeah, I am a very lucky man. I got married. I got married to my high school sweetheart, Lori. Doesn't have a selfish bone in her body. Moral compass points exactly north, and is not selfish. And she's been an amazing mother. And I have 5 kids, so I have 2 older boys and 3 girls. My oldest son, Randy, he started shooting 1,000 yards when he was 12 years old. Very, very technical on the firearm side. And then I have my son, Jeffrey, who's extremely mechanical, and Victoria, that's like just like her mother. And then Caitlin, I call her my 70s funky chick. She's super, super funny. And she's a lot of fun. And then my youngest daughter, Elizabeth, is just got an amazing amount of grace, and she's our singer of the bunch. And so, you know, how you influence. I mean, here I am, a professional hunter. I believe in hunting. My kids grew up around it. And you wonder whether or not how much pressure you should be on when they start. Well, my boys are just ballistic. I mean, they're identical to me. They're knowledge based, the way that they look at things. They're very logical. They're predators in every sense of the word. And then my daughter, for about 4 years in a row, I kept asking her, I'm like, hey, Tweet, I want you to go on a hunt with me. And she would always say, Dad, I'm really not ready. And the funny part about it is this is all executed on Western Extreme TV. And then the next year, she finally came to me and said, Dad, I'm ready to shoot a deer. And with a tear in my eye, my next question was, with a bow or with a gun? And she said, duh, Dad, with a bow. And then the funny part about it is, on the television show, she tells everybody that she goes, I just felt more confident with my bow than I would with my gun. And I was thinking to myself, what other girl on planet Earth would say that other than a Burnworth kid?
Right.
I mean, I have more confidence in my bow than with my gun. And that's because she grew up being an archer. Right. And she just, you know, the other thing went bang and she could shoot the bow well. So it's funny because her very first buck, we were all together and, you know, you just get supercharged. And we have a big buck contest at work. And I started calling all my buddies and everybody. I'm like, okay, I'm going to come off the road. I get to hunt with Victoria this year. I mean, this is big stuff. This is one of the biggest hunts of my life. I mean, and we got to win the big buck contest. None of that like, oh, they have to start on a small one. Forget that.
Right.
Let's shoot them a big one. And so we couldn't find a really, really big buck. We had some game tracker cameras and it was like 27 degrees outside. It was too cold for Victoria. And I went to her and I said, babe, this is not a good day for you, but this is a good day for the deer. And if you'll give me 5 hours and you'll dress up, we'll get a buck today. And so we went and climbed in the tree stand and she had a beanie on and she had hands on her. Cause I always believe that you should never have anything on your hands. You should touch the riser. It'll affect your shooting. You shouldn't have any kind of a mask on your face. You have to feel the string on your face. Your release has to fit the spot. And so, I was over her shoulder. I was videotaping and I'm fiddling around and I look to my right and here comes a buck that we had no idea, never got a game tracker figure, typical rut. Buck comes in, turns totally, quarters away, and she shoots him absolutely in the 12 ring, lives 20 seconds. And she was shaking so bad with excitement and the smile on her face, she about fell out of the tree stand. And the whole family came to celebrate. And that was like a really magical day. And then she, the next year, did the same thing. Early season, buck came in, sat for 4 hours, believe it or not, and shot one right through the 12 ring. And that, because of that experience that Victoria had with me, spending time and understanding it, and all of the time that she spent with the bow, enjoying archery before she ever wanted to take an animal, and me never pressuring her, but her always knowing that that was part of our lifestyle and who we are. And she never had disbelief in it. It just didn't know whether she wanted to. And the number one thing a woman wants to know when she's going to shoot an animal, she wants it to expire quickly. She doesn't want it to suffer. So ethically, shooting the right broadhead, using the right arrow, and having them tuned and practiced from an elevated position on a platform that's small really did help. And then she encouraged my other daughters to hunt. So it all just came full circle. And so like I just on public land this last few days, you know, we were able to, both my girls took 4x4s, in 3 days. The wind was blowing 25 miles an hour and it was cold outside, but we just went at it hard and they both were able to take great bucks, where a lot of guys in Montana right now are jealous.
That's fantastic. I love hearing that kind of stuff. That's great. Oh man, Jim, what if you could pick one hunting tip of all the hunting tips that are out there and all the things you've ever experienced? If you could pick one, what would be your number one hunting tip of all time?
It's not your camo. It's not your camo. It's not your boots. It's not the bow. It's not the firearm that you use. The number one thing you have to do is learn and contend with the wind. It's the one thing that'll screw you up.
Okay.
You hunt the wind and it'll help you all the way around. You have to pay attention to it. There is no shortcuts when it comes to wind.
Awesome. Love it. All right. So we all have these things in our packs that are good luck charms. They're pacifiers, I guess, in some sense. And you feel naked if you left it in your truck before you walked into the field. What's that one item you have to have with you other than your firearm or weapon that makes you feel comfortable when you're hunting?
Jolly Ranchers.
Jolly Ranchers. Interesting.
100%, bro. 100%. Jolly Ranchers are a reward system in camp with me. And when people find this out, they think it's funny. And I just got like 3 texts this year from other people telling other people, but it's a way for me to make it lighthearted, because hunting can be hard. It can be tough. But a few of my friends, like Josh Clough from HS Precision that I hunt out in South Dakota, he reminds me every year that hunting is not about what you shoot. It's about having fun with your friends, reminding me to laugh. And so my Jolly Ranchers, I reward people with, and each one of them has a color code and a value. And so, whenever I'm around somebody, so if you get a blueberry, the blue, number 5, yep, you did not do a good job. And if you got a watermelon, you're an ace. You found the buck that we're going to pursue. But,
that's funny.
It may be something that I use as a joke, and it lightens everybody up, and it becomes a gag in a hunt every week. And it's probably an old joke, but it is my joke, and it's something I enjoy. And I love Jolly Ranchers. I always have. I love chewing on stuff.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love that. It's the first time I've heard that on this show. All right. So if you could, as the Jim Burnworth of today, the 47-year-old Jim Burnworth, if you could give a tip to the 20-year-old Jim Burnworth, what would you say to him?
This might be a little long-winded, but I have to tell you this one thing. I really believe that we look around and all of us are searching for what God intended in our lives. I feel like I'm the lucky one. I'm the guy that got to do what it is I love to do. My heart has been filled. I've had an extraordinary family. I've had an extraordinary ride. I've had extraordinary people in my life. And I've got to work on 13 feature films in my lifetime as well. Mm-hmm. Back when we used to own the big video facilities. And there's a movie called Simon Birch. And it's a little movie about a little boy that was deformed. And it's a story of faith. And he just knows beyond a shadow of a doubt that God designed him for this amazing purpose, this one thing that makes him who he is. And I think we all search in our whole lives. There's so many people that are 40 and 50 years old that search their entire lives and never truly find what it is they're designed to do. And on our deathbed, we look up and we go, is that it? Did we fulfill our destiny? What was really important? What were the 3 or 4 things that are really, really magical? It's like Bob Beamon, something as simple as jumping. He runs as fast as he can. He cuts a line. He jumps in the air. He lands. He turns around as a flashbulb captures this one moment.
Right.
An expression on his face that he just broke the world record by 1.5 feet. And so I think all of the fears that we have as young people, as we live our lives through seasons, the first season is to educate yourself. The second season is to capitalize on what it is you know. And the last season of your life is your significant part that we try to put out of order. But if we just follow the faith that we have in ourselves, that we really listen to who we are. I was designed to be a bow hunter, bro. I was designed to use my technical mind. It has so many attributes. I have no idea how I ended up on TV. I have no idea the road that it took. It wasn't planned. It happened. But, like my dad used to say, do everything in your life 1% better. Everything. If you just figure out, he used to say, I'm going to get out of my own chair. I'm going to go outside and I'm going to look back through my own window and figure out how to go kick my own ass. And if you just take charge of life like that and you think about it and you really do care, you have to show up and you have to care. So I think I would have told myself, whatever your mind is thinking, whatever's in your heart, whoever you are, just do it. Don't make excuses for it. Be yourself and follow it and don't give up.
That's awesome. That's so good. Oh man. So Jim, where can we find you when, hanging out here with us on the microphones? Where can we find you on social media and websites, things like that?
But I try to get back to everybody. I really do. I'm gone 200 days a year and stuff, but I'm really becoming more and more social. It allows me to reach out. It allows me to help and it allows me to learn more. And so I'm on Facebook.
Okay.
And everybody can, write in, ask questions. I try to answer them the best I can. And I'm not an expert at anything, but I just love what I do, and I'm here to help. So if they want to go to, Jim Burnworth Facebook page, okay, I'm there. And if not, you can watch me on Western Extreme and choose your weapon in an outdoor channel. I'm going to be a lifer.
Excellent.
For sure.
And when can we catch the show on the Outdoor Channel?
You know what, but it varies. Like, I think I have 8 air times a week on and off, and I don't know when those are right now. I really apologize. Once the shows are done, we're doing almost 100 episodes a year.
Okay.
So I just can't keep track of everything and everybody. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. That's a lot of shows to keep track of. Just keep tuned into the Outdoor Channel and you'll find Jim, I'm sure. All right, Jim, this has been a pleasure and an honor, and you filled our heads with great information, and I can't thank you enough for spending an hour with us and just giving us a little bit of insight into your world and seeing what's going on. I
really appreciate you guys. You know, this level of technology, the fact that you guys care, you know, so many people from all walks of life are all connected by this thing called the outdoors that we love. And the more education we do, the more that we care about it, the more that we're helping each other and mentoring. And technology like this is really educating. And I think that's what the Outdoor Channel and the radio podcast things are doing for our industry. People are making better decisions. There's less poaching. There's more people caring. And we're the ones that pay to play. So I want to thank both of you guys for everything that you've done, and I'm sorry for being so long-winded. So
you don't have to apologize for being long-winded. We like that. We love.
You definitely shared some information. Yes. Definitely shared some information and go a long way with everybody. All the listeners should learn from this podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks. Thank you so much, Jim. How about that, Dusty?
Oh man, that was phenomenal. Really, that's probably one of the most technical podcasts that we've ever been involved with, Jay.
Hands down. I think he actually provided probably some of the best tips we've ever heard on the Big Buck podcast. Yeah, I have to go back and listen myself. I have to go back and listen to this show a few times just to make sure I got it right.
I think that if you take the information Jim passed along to you, you are going to change the way you shoot.
Yes, it will change your archery life for sure.
It's going to perfect you in such a way that you're going to be an unbelievable shot.
Yes. And
wow.
I could certainly use that because I'm more or less one of those weekend bow shooters. I mean, I shoot in the backyard and I have fun, and I'm not a bad shot when I'm shooting at a immobile target, on the down on the archery range. But put me in real life, yeah, I've killed some deer with my bow and stuff like that. But I think I'm going to be a better bow hunter if I apply the things that Jim is talking about in this show.
Oh, yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.
I don't know how you follow this, Dusty, and you've done a pretty good job. But how do you follow that with the Chubby Tines tip of the week?
I'm going to talk a little bit about getting discouraged. Whitetail hunting is a mental game. It's so mental that it will literally force you into quitting hunting for the season. You're going to make mistakes, Jay. You're going to mess up and you're going to screw up and you're going to have times that you're like, man, if I just done this one little thing different, I would have been successful.
Right.
But along the way, it's educating you and it's making you step your game up just 1, 2, 3 notches. And that's something that I can't stress and embed enough, that don't get discouraged if you make a mistake in the whitetail woods. That's why we're hunters. That's why we go out there. For one, we relax and enjoy the outdoors. But along the way, we learn how to be better hunters every time we go and sit in the stand. Seed time is you can't buy it and you can't purchase information that you learn by being in your tree stand seat. But along the way, there's going to be ups and downs, and that's part of it. And I'm here to tell you that I've been in my lowest lows and I've been in my highest highs in the whitetail woods. But if you stick with it and you take all the knowledge that the whitetail or any animal that you're hunting, it has to offer you, just by watching them, you embed all this knowledge of their habits and the way they react to different things and how they travel, and all that information absorbs in, and you become the sponge. That discouragement is now an educational process. You no longer get that discouragement. So, bear with it. You're going to get down. You're going to get out and you're going to say, I don't want to go hunting anymore. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
But just remember that at that point, get educated by either your mistake, your mess up, or your mishap, or your miss shot. Educate yourself on what you did wrong. And the next time that you're in that situation, you know what to do. You know how to handle it. You know what to do to make it right.
Yeah.
And from that point on, once you get that mental game on, that it's just an educational process. If you screw up or mess up or miss or whatever happens, if you think about it in a different way, that mental discouragement goes away. And it takes a couple years.
Right.
It's not going to happen the first 3 or 4 years. You may spend 10 years in the woods before you finally get confident enough to learn from your mental mistakes.
So you're saying basically learn from your hunt and take your failures as positive reinforcements to make you a better hunter.
That's exactly right. And that's hard to do for a long period of time. It takes years before you can do that.
Yeah.
And it's tough. There's times where before I just want to be like, oh my gosh, I just give up. I've done everything I thought I knew to do. I've done all this. I've done that. I've set this up right. I've learned. I've listened. I've done everything that I know to do. But there's always that one next little small step that you figure out that this really changes how things turn out. So just stick with it. Take that mental negative and turn it into a positive and learn from it.
That is the quintessential, probably one of the most important aspects of hunting is just learning and absorbing even the failures to excite you to go back out, because now you've learned how to overcome one of those things that didn't go well.
It's amazing once that you learn how to do that, how much more your hunts are enjoyable at that point on.
Right. And you basically just have to say to yourself, I don't know how this is going to go, but no matter what happens, whether I am successful or not, depending upon your definition, the point is that I'm in the field and that no matter what happens here today, I'm going to learn something or I'm going to enjoy something. And it's going to get me back out here tomorrow.
And you can't purchase that. There's no money can buy that.
Yeah.
You know, it's something that you embed in yourself and you go on. It's amazing. Once you get to that point where you're comfortable with a mistake and you learn from it, oh my gosh.
Right.
It's so valuable.
Yes.
It's priceless.
Be comfortable with your mistakes. That's a great way to put it. Awesome.
Yeah,
man.
you know, and I think that after hearing Jim, I had to come up with a great tip of the week, and I hope I did well.
I think you did. My friend, my bro. You did well. So, Dusty, where can we find you when you're not hanging out here with me?
Facebook. Well, right now you can find me in the tree stand in the Whitetail Woods here in Ohio. But
if we can find you, you know, because you keep it pretty tight.
Right.
You know, we can. I'm not sure I can see with all your camo and keep it kind of tight-lipped. So I have to ask your wife where you hunt. But other than that,
she sure knows how to tell too. It's crazy. Man, you'd have thought you'd have put $1,000 in front of her, but really you didn't put nothing in front of her. She just talks.
You just ask.
Facebook.com/Chubby Tines Outdoors, Facebook.com/Chubby Gobbler. You can look me up on Instagram @Chasing Antler. Shoot me a follow and I'll follow you back. And, you know, you kind of get in a little bit of my personal life. I'm not real active on Instagram, but I do post a few interesting things here and there. Jay, where can we find you when you're not in the woods chasing after the New Hampshire whitetail or on the mic?
Well, best place to reach out to me is jay@bigbuckregistry.com. That's our email address. You can check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/bigbuckregistry. And if you'd like to get one of your most recent kills featured on our Facebook page in front of our 175,000 followers, all you have to do is go to bigbuckregistry.com/mybuck, and all the instructions will be there for what we require to have your buck featured on our Facebook page. You can also find us on Twitter, twitter.com/bigbuckregistry. If you're in the middle of a hunt and you shoot a big deer and you'd like to call in your excitement, give us a call at 724-613-2825. And if you are an iTunes user or an Apple user, please give us a review about this show by doing a search for Big Buck Registry. And if you would please, if you've listened to this show on an iDevice, hit that subscribe button right there. And let us know that you like this show because you pushed the subscribe button. Oh, man, I think that's a wrap.
Big buck, everywhere a big buck.
Love that. I'm Jay Scott.
And I'm Dusty Phillips.
This is the Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Deer Hunting Podcast. We'll see you next week.
Can't wait.